Hi, welcome to Biohacking with Brittany, a podcast focused on holistic health, nutrition, biohacking, and more. I'm your host, Brittany Ford, registered holistic nutritionist and self-proclaimed biohacker. During the last 10 years, I've focused on healing my gut and hormonal issues through lifestyle changes, nutrition, and of course, biohacks. And now I teach others to do the same. I'm so excited you're joining me today, so let's dive right in. Well, thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Biohacking with Brittany. I am really stoked about this one because we are diving into plant medicine, something that I've kind of dabbled in, but not too much, but I'm definitely interested in doing in the future. And as most people in the biohacking world know, it's kind of popular now, things like ayahuasca and other plant medicines as well. And today we have Jonathan D. Potter on the podcast. He is the founder of Behold Retreats, a company that teaches you how to elevate yourself with plant medicine during retreats around the world. So, Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, Brittany. It's a real pleasure to be connected, and very excited to join you on your podcast.
Amazing. So I would love it for us if you could kind of take us back to the beginning of your journey. Really, what inspired you to start this retreat company?
So my journey with plant medicine started about 5 years ago, and honestly speaking, I was a bit of a skeptic myself. I grew up in Hawaii, and it's such an amazing and beautiful place, but unfortunately, there's a lot of substance abuse in Hawaii. And so growing up around that sort of energy, I didn't really see anything good coming from substances. And so I grew up very anti-substances. And so, I was very surprised when early in my 30s, I had my first plant medicine experience and came to recognize the potential that's there. And so I was with a couple friends in Peru and, had this incredible, deep, profound, overwhelming experience. And it really kind of kicked open a number of doors for me. And over the course of the years that followed, I came to recognize a few different things. One, the depth of the potential that's available for plant medicine from and for plant medicine, and secondly, that I had made a whole series of mistakes over my first 3 years attending about 8 to 10 different retreats around the globe. And so I became, through my own work and through my own breakthroughs, and also kind of beginning to facilitate retreats for friends, I became really motivated to help other people have similar breakthroughs to myself, and also, perhaps even more importantly, to help others avoid the mistakes that I made for those first 3 years.
Cool. So, yeah, I mean, we can totally dive into that as well, but I'm very curious what you would consider those mistakes that you made on those past retreats.
How long do we have to record? It's such a deep subject, right?
Okay.
I think I'll provide a few very high level points, and then I'll let you steer the conversation as you think is most interesting. I think foremost, it's important for people to really think deeply about their motivation. I think, as you said, as we opened the podcast, this is a topic that's becoming more popular, and so
Mhm.
as it does, people are kind of saying, "Oh, well, yeah, I've had a few friends that have done this and they had a great experience, so I want to do it." And I think it's important that we all take the time and the energy to really educate ourselves and to understand, for our own purposes, our individual motivations for exploring the space. It's not work that should be taken lightly. So I think, motivation is one. I think preparation is another piece that's generally overlooked. In relation to that, what they're skipping is a lot of the mental and emotional work before and after these very powerful retreats. Part of the motivation um, for naming our business Behold Retreats was, in fact, that these retreats are very powerful experiences, and you kind of need to, or you can benefit from beholding them and really taking them seriously. And leveraging each of these retreat opportunities as a real, as a real replatforming of your quality of life and quality of experience. The other element that I think is important is in relation to expert guidance. Now, the reality is that this space is unregulated today. Where this work is being permitted, there are no standards for safety, for standards of care, and so for the untrained eye, it's very difficult to actually know what good looks like. And so, as I mentioned before, I was attending all these different retreats, and I thought through those experiences, that I knew what good looked like, but it turns out that that wasn't quite right. And so, finding really expert guidance is a real challenge in this space because it is completely unregulated. Um, and it's not to take away from the very good people who are doing this work. Generally speaking, they have very much the highest intentions in mind for their clients, but at the same time, it's just very difficult to find experts in this field. And so and then finally, I think also integration. People often jump on a plane, go to one of these retreat centers. They have some profound breakthroughs, as I mentioned, I did during my first experience. And then a week or a month later, they're exactly back to square one. So, we all have these deeply ingrained mental patterns that we've been working on for decades. And so, unwinding those and beginning to set, better thinking patterns for ourselves, and overcoming some of those limiting beliefs and behaviors takes some real effort. And so guidance through that period post retreat, where you leave the retreat feeling like $1,000,000, and then a week later you're flipping off the guy in traffic. So there's this real gap that's happened between the end of the retreat and your return home, where you've gone back to work, and work situations, triggers, and family, and all of those sorts of things, and you kind of can very quickly revert to your pre-retreat self. So at a high level, that's a few of the mistakes that I think people are making. But yeah, I'd be happy to delve into any of those in more detail that you might find interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely heard similar reviews and experiences of everything that you just said. And it's interesting how I think those, not, maybe mistakes, but those experiences are actually kind of common. Um, and yeah, and so it's interesting that you created a company out of that, which I think is really cool and really needed. So for everyone listening, just to take it back a step, who doesn't necessarily understand what plant medicine is or the different types, can you explain that to us?
Yeah, sure. So, plant medicine, or sometimes referred to as psychedelics, right? I think it's kind of the more common
Hmm.
lingo. Personally, I prefer plant medicine because psychedelics tends to summon a sort of crazed association as a result of the government campaigns that started in the 60s. So plant medicine, generally, we're describing, as you said before, ayahuasca, San Pedro, psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, and we're talking about deep deep experiences where we have increased access to our subconscious, and we're able to really navigate the depths of our mind through these experiences, and as a result of that, come to understand ourselves better, and hopefully release some of the limiting beliefs and identify some of the behaviors that are no longer serving us. So when we talk about plant medicine retreats, that's really what we're talking about. Is generally speaking, jumping on a plane to Costa Rica, Peru, or perhaps Mexico, and participating in one of these plant medicine experiences over the course of, say, 5 days to a week, sometimes 2 weeks.
Okay, I want to interrupt this episode to quickly talk about my EMF underwear, blocking underwear that is coming out very soon. It is called Emphies, so EMFIES, and it's coming in April. And everyone who follows me on Instagram, I have been working on this for the past few months, and I'm really excited about it. So it's cute, it's comfy, and it's functional, meaning it actually protects the body from EMF around us, from our computers, laptops, Wi-Fi, routers, cell phone towers, etc. More and more research is coming out showing how this negatively impacts female reproductive organs, so leading to or helping lead to infertility and irregular menstrual cycles and contributing to miscarriages and PCOS and all of these health issues that are on the rise for females. So if we can do one thing further to really help our bodies and our health in such an easy way, we might as well, right? And so I've created EMF underwear for women. And it's made by women, right? So it's actually cute. It's actually comfy. It's not made by a different company that produces a bunch of EMF gear. It's very, very particular on the design. So if you want to sign up for the pre-order waiting list, I highly suggest you do so. You can go to www.biohackingbrittany.com/pages/EMFs, which is EMFIES, or you can go to my Instagram and it's on the link in my bio. There's going to be a very limited quantity in the beginning, and everybody on this list is going to get first access. So I highly suggest you join. And yeah, look out for them dropping very soon. Right. So, like in general, I've seen ayahuasca retreats, especially ayahuasca, well, mushrooms as well, but especially ayahuasca. I've seen the ceremonies and retreats really increase in the last few years,
Hmm.
even locally, like in Canada or in the States. In LA, you can go to them. But I kind of question the authenticity of those retreats, and it's kind of hard to, like, I haven't been to one, so I can't necessarily say personally, but compared to doing it like in Costa Rica or in Peru with a shaman, with these people who are properly trained. So what's your opinion on the increase in popularity and kind of like the fad of doing an ayahuasca retreat?
Yeah. Great questions. I really like that. I'll take a slight tangent to some of the materials that have appeared on Netflix more recently. I don't know if you've seen any of those. It's been interesting to see how ayahuasca and plant medicine more broadly has kind of emerged quite rapidly into the mainstream media. One thing that I am grateful for is that it does appear that the majority of the coverage in the mainstream media remains balanced. And when I say that, I don't mean that they are talking about 95% of the good things, which, 99% of the good things, which is the reality, and the 1% of the bad things. But what these shows tend to do is they show you 50% of the good and 50% of the bad, right? Even
Mhm.
so, there's a disproportionate representation of the bad, which I think is actually very healthy, even though this is my business. And so people often come to me and they're like, "Oh yeah, did you see this? Did you see that?" Showing the negative aspects of this work. But I think it's very important that people do understand the negative aspects. And another dynamic that I'll share before I kind of jump into a few of my own perspectives is if I was to hazard a guess, I would guess that 95% plus of the potential benefits that could come from doing this work, if you did it with really expert guidance, is being missed. And so, like you said, what's generally happening is a lot more casual, right? So, the way that I look at this work now and the practitioners therein is that there's kind of three types, perhaps four. So, the first type of practitioners are people who administer this medicine, right? So they get a group together, they sit in a circle, and everyone in the circle drinks the medicine, and then the experience unfolds as the experience unfolds. That's kind of the first level. The second is those who are doing this in a more therapeutic or somatic context, right? So those are therapists or practitioners who really kind of quote unquote hold space and are really focused on the facilitation of a particular person or small group of people through that experience. And generally that's slightly deeper work. And then the third is people who understand the more energetic component, right? So there are, for anyone who's kind of been to or participated in plant medicine ceremonies, particularly with ayahuasca, certainly you can feel different energies are being moved, in and out of the room, in and out of you. And so the really expert practitioners in this space know how to manage that and how to manage your specific journey, right? And so, generally speaking, the people who are doing this work at the highest level are able to do so without a lot of the physical purging, and that's because they're managing your journey in a much more managed, I guess is the word. It is much more managed way. And so they're managing the energies and they're managing you in such a way that you're actually making big progress in a short space of time without the associated challenges. Well, not all of the associated challenges, but without perhaps some of the more traumatic challenges of the physical purging, etc., which is commonplace with ayahuasca.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's a good point. Like, I guess I never really realized how rapid it actually has become somewhat mainstream with the shows on Netflix, and just like social media in general, and yeah, the wellness market obviously is growing as well, and this just seems to be the next thing. But there is a way to do it, I guess, more like healthier for you and actually get the full benefit from it compared to just doing, you know, an easier one or a cheaper one or a local one or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and it's the the way that I would look at that. Say if I was in LA or in Vancouver, and if I was looking for an experience myself, the way that I would go about selecting an experience would be to understand another individual's journey, right? And what I mean by that is, tell me how you have been able to improve your quality of life by working with this person. And so I would actually look for people who have worked consistently with a single practitioner over time. And I would ask
Mhm.
them to share with me, where they were in life when they started that journey, preferably, months, if not years ago, and the quality of life improvements that they've been able to make to their everyday life. That is fundamentally what we're looking for in terms of the quality of work. It's very easy to have very profound and transcendent experiences. Like, yeah, that's that's available. But what we're really looking for is improvements to quality of life, and what I would describe as elevated consciousness. If there's a single goal that should be, I hate to reduce it to this, but if there's a primary goal which should be front and center to people's minds as it relates to this work, it's deepening your self understanding, which is, your level of consciousness, and through that, being able to integrate those experiences of higher levels of consciousness into your daily experience, so that life kind of turns on to easy mode
Yeah.
through that elevated consciousness and through that integration and embodiment into your essence.
Right. So what other like typical experiences do people have on your retreats? Like, of course, you hear so much about people purging in different ways, and also like I forget the saying, but it's like one ayahuasca retreat is like equal to 10 years of therapy or something. Like these are the types of things, like the narrative around it. So I'm just curious, like what you actually see from people who do your retreats.
Yeah. So one of the things that we always ask of our clients is is to set the expectations at the door. It's if one of the ways that I share this is that if you work with someone who's experienced in this space, has been working in this space for decades, has served thousands of clients, and you ask them going into a ceremony, what's going to happen tonight? They're going to turn to you and they're going to say, I have no idea.
Hmm.
And so regardless of the quality of the practitioner and the context of the individual going into such a ceremony, we really don't know what's going to happen on a given ceremony. Now that being said, of course, there are patterns that emerge, right? And there's certainly a breadth of experience, and so it might be helpful for me to share with you, the first retreat that I went on, my two friends and I um, had profoundly different experiences that were exactly what they needed to be for each of us, um, and 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 we all benefited massively as a result. Now, my friend Zubin, he had an incredibly powerful experience. His experience was completely transcendent, where he was, up there flying with the eagles and had completely retractable wings, and he was laughing and flying in the, on one side of me
Mhm.
for hours on end, and just had this really beautiful, profound, and spiritual experience that showed him, beautiful things that were going to come to pass, for his future. Whereas for my other friend, he didn't really take this experience seriously. He didn't do the dieting that was recommended. He didn't. There was many things that were recommended that he do in the lead up to the retreat that he just completely ignored. And so the medicine was very challenging for him physically. Oh, I should say, Zubin had absolutely no physical purging whatsoever. My first friend. My second friend, he had the opposite. He had absolutely no visions. He had absolutely no spiritual experience. He just had an incredibly difficult and challenging physical experience for like hours and hours and hours on end. Um, and
Wow.
and so, but both of them had very transformational experiences that benefited them, incredibly, from that point in time. Now, for me, I had a very challenging spiritual and a very challenging physical experience. That was, it was just very profoundly different than what the two of them had. But again, it was the right thing for me at the time.
Right. Right. So, in terms of like right now with COVID, I mean, of course, it's harder for people to travel. Um, but if someone was interested in this for this year or next year, and they want to like look at your retreats, like what are you currently offering, and what are you doing? Yeah, what are you doing this year?
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting period for opening a travel business. The last some of my friends have laughed at me, and it's fair enough. But we've definitely seen significant demand for doing this work privately. For those
Mhm.
that are in a financial position to do so, that is 100% the best way to do this work. I made once I found the right guidance and I started working with those healers. Privately, I made more progress in just 3 weeks than I had made in the 3.5 years before that. So when you've got,
Wow.
private healers just focused on you and they know what they're doing in order to elevate your consciousness, it's really quite profound what can be done in a short space of time. So, given the COVID situation, there's been a lot of people who has started, that we've been supporting privately. What often takes place is that people start by doing this work in a group context. Often people have a little bit of nerves in relation to exploring this space, which is completely normal and healthy. And so there's a sort of quote unquote safety in numbers that people feel. And so often they start by doing this work in a group setting, and then once they recognize the potential and the value of doing this work in a deeper way, then they move into doing this work privately if they can afford to do so. So we have been hosting, group retreats as well. I guess, despite the challenges related to travel, there are still people who are willing to continue to facilitate these experiences, usually smaller groups. And there's also people who are willing to travel for these experiences. And so, country by country, facilitator by facilitator, we've been supporting our people in the ways that they see fit. And it seems that, again, despite the travel challenges, that people are willing to travel for this work, because it's a good year for working on emotional and personal development, as we all know.
So I've been using Fume, a great tool for increasing performance, energy, and overall wellness. It uses essential oils, and you breathe through the essential oils through your mouth and out through your nose. I seriously love this. Not only does it help with stress management or sleep, depending on the essential oil that you choose, but it can also help with energy. The creators actually came up with the idea when they were using peppermint in their hands before their workouts to like breathe in and help circulation and help fuel them to be more energized for their workouts. And then they created a tool that did the job much better. And now I love it. So I use it before my workouts, I use it while I'm at my desk, because I love essential oils. And I also love breathing better and deeper because I'm a very shallow breather. And I love that Fume reminds me to breathe better. If you are interested in trying it out, go to the link in the show notes and use Brittany 10 as the discount code to get you a discount for the first time you try them, and get 10% off. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I'm glad that that's happening, and I'm glad people are seeking you guys out. It's really needed, like you said, like during this year, last couple of years, really since COVID has taken over. Um, so it seems like the stigma, I guess, around hallucinating and plant medicines and all of that is kind of decreasing. Would you agree with that over the past 5 years? And like, do you still think there's stigma around it? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think the conversation is changing rapidly for the better. Um,
Hmm.
the I think the if we look at the surrounding dynamics in relation to mental health, I think the reasons become clear. The reality is that we continue to see unchecked growth in mental health problems, right? So whether that's anxiety, depression, addictive disorders, the list goes on and on. And those numbers just continue to go up year by year. So it's quite clear that the previous therapeutic and pharmacological solutions that we were pursuing were not yielding the results that we're looking for, which is human well-being. Um, and and I think again, if they were, I'm not to take anything away from therapy or pharmacological solutions. I think it's important. They have a place, absolutely, but they're not turning around the trends. So it's important that we look elsewhere. The other thing that I think is unhelpful in relation to the way that we've been looking at mental health is that in the West, it kind of feels like we've set this subjective bar at a particular level. And anyone who's below this bar that we've set has a mental health problem. And anyone who's above that bar has no problem and nothing to worry about. And that's actually not it. The reality is we can all improve our everyday quality of life and quality of experience. And sometimes one of the ways that I analogize this, because I was thinking back to me before my first retreat experience. The way that I've come to analogize this is with physical pain. So I had this experience probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, where it completely reset my spectrum of understanding in relation to physical pain. So before this experience, I dislocated my shoulder really badly. So before dislocating my shoulder, I thought that I had kind of experienced the full spectrum of physical pain. Right? I had paper cuts and all these minor scrapes and bruises or whatever. But I had also, more serious skating and surfing accidents. I had, fallen off a waterfall, down a cliff, and onto a rock. Kind of things that I had thought were at, the 10 out of 10 scale, or close to 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. Now, once I had this dislocation of my shoulder, my previous 10 became a 3. So I had just
Hmm.
fundamentally reset my understanding of physical pain. And the reality is that there might be, I hope there isn't in my future anyway. The reality is there might even be, physically, there might be experiences that are even, substantially more physically painful than my shoulder dislocation. I don't know. I'm only kind of limited by my own subjective range of experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
No, yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, so the reason I share that is that I believe that mental health or levels of consciousness, if we can use them interchangeably, are actually exactly the same as that, which is that it's difficult for us to imagine something that we haven't yet experienced. But once we, through these experiences, once we recognize that there are states of being that are more joyful, more loving, and more blissful, and just so much better, then we can begin to, even without plant medicine, once we get back home, etc., we can actually, through meditation, contemplative practices, becoming more aware of our thinking patterns, etc., we can actually begin to make very substantial steps towards those states of being for everyday life, which is really what this work is all about.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Like the idea that it's all relative to what you know. Um, and then if you change what you know, then the past things obviously suddenly look very different and maybe not as intense as we once thought they were. Um, yeah, I think that's
Absolutely.
a really cool approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of like the future of plant medicine, like I know you briefly touched on this, but do you think it's going to become even more popular? Like where do you really see it going?
Yeah, we're at a really interesting juncture in relation to plant medicine. Um, it's certainly worth acknowledging that um, there are many different perspectives in relation to plant medicine, and as you might imagine, people who work in this space are very highly opinionated, and generally think that they have the right thing, and that other people have the wrong thing, and so we're doing our very best not to add to that dynamic, but I think that I look at this industry relatively organically. What
Mhm.
happened in the 60s was a bit of a overreaction to this space getting kind of evolving or emerging very rapidly in a sort of an unchecked way. So I hope that we have learned from those experiences in the 60s. Um, and that we are more conscious in how we approach this space this time around, so that there will be, it's fair to say that there will be some damage, right, some backlash as a result
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
this rapidly emerging space. We've all heard stories of people that have very challenging experiences with plant medicine. So the I think it's important that we kind of keep that front of mind as this space does rapidly emerge. I think what we will see is that as more, how do I say this? As more tooling and capabilities and more maturity comes into this space, people will naturally gravitate towards those experiences which are proven to be transformational versus those experiences which are just quote unquote available. At the moment, it's a bit of a wild west, right? Because
Mhm.
as you alluded to before, either of these experiences are happening underground, or as I spoke about before, they're happening in unregulated contexts. So, the reality is that the overwhelming majority of people don't know what good looks like. And so you can go on Retreat Guru, you can see, a whole bunch of 5-star reviews and go, yep, that's great. That's for me. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this work is being done at a high level. And so it's very exciting. There's some technology platforms that are coming that will begin to standardize improvements to quality of life and stuff like that. And so I think that the more high quality practitioners will naturally gravitate towards those sorts of platforms. And so we will begin to see some separation between the people who are doing this work at the highest level and those who are doing their best but don't necessarily have the expertise.
That's really cool. That's so exciting. Yeah, I'm just excited for the narrative around plant medicine to increase, but also change as well, like you said. And I think it can be so healing. And I'm excited to try different things as well because this is like very up my alley to try these different things. But yeah, so where can people find you? How can they connect? And if they're interested in doing one of your retreats, where are all the locations that you host them?
Yeah, so you can find us on Behold Retreats online or on Instagram. And yeah, I think so. We have retreats available in Costa Rica, Mexico, and Peru. Those seem to be our three most popular destinations, and then equally in Europe, where we predominantly do retreats in the Netherlands. I'm based in Asia, and we're very close to establishing, knock on wood, establishing also a first location in Asia.
Cool. Those are awesome places. I'm excited. Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was awesome. And I will add all of those links to the show notes so everyone can find you.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me, Brittany, and yeah, really appreciated our conversation.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. As always, feel free to screenshot this episode and tag me if you'd like me to respond. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you have a question about your health, my DMs are always open and I'm currently taking new clients. Thanks and see you next time.